Hello, welcome to Halcyon, where, as you probably guessed by the intro, this week we're going to be touching on a game. Oh, put it this way, if you ever watched the movie Inception and didn't get it, click away now. Save yourself time, click away now, because this game is as intrinsically designed as any good thriller book, any good movie that has left you scratching your head at the end as if to say, what the hell just happened? It's a gaming experience that you need to play at least 2 or 3 times in order to actually get the full experience that the designers of the game were aiming for. Bioshock Infinite is a game that takes you on a journey of redemption. It takes you on a journey that will highlight aspects of the human psyche that you probably never were made to confront before. It will take you on an internal journey as well as an external journey. As a male protagonist by the name of Booker DeWitt, you're tasked with bringing a girl from a floating city of Columbia back to New York to wipe away a debt of some description. And in this journey you will come across things that are beautiful, mesmerizing, that will invoke deep emotions in you, that will leave you conflicted, and will leave you scratching your head in many circumstances during the first playthrough. And again, I must preface this by saying that anyone that's ever played this game through once is doing themselves a tremendous disservice. You need to play this game at least twice to be able to appreciate how this game flips the script on you in more ways than you could ever imagine. So this week we're going to take a look at a game that I love. It's absolutely amazing, it's beautiful, it's a masterpiece of a game. Let's check it out. Bioshock Infinite. Start with the gameplay first. The game follows a very simple first-person shooting mechanic with the added bonus of having plasmids, or in this case, they're known as vigors, powers that you can use to unleash on your enemies for different effects depending on the desired effect. The main goal of the game is to traverse its many single point-to-point levels that have been designed in such a way that there is this feeling of a world. You can't just go from point A to B. There's a lot of side-tracking, backtracking, which is useful in a game to make it feel fleshed out. You'll want to explore all of the levels as thoroughly as you can, and most importantly of all, this game is designed to make you stop and stare for a few moments at a time. You don't blast through this game as quickly as you can. You stop and you marvel at its world. The combat in Bioshock Infinite is different to most games in the sense that there's a sense of verticality to it. The vigors add an extra depth to the combat that means that while in combat situations you can choose your tactics more wisely when confronting enemies, choosing to either rely mainly on your guns to outflank them and overpower the lighter enemies, or indeed to use vigors against your enemies in order to play them off one against each other. You can also combine vigors to utilize different attack tactics, such as utilizing fire with the crows or electricity with the crows in order to overpower your enemies from afar and then get the jump on them with weapons. You'll find that the shooting mechanics are very simplistic. You'll never really find yourself using the sights, and you'll be using the skyhook on a regular basis in order to change platform to platform in order to make sure that you're never ever ganged up on. This happens quite a lot unless you're really, really careful, and with the more powerful enemies, it certainly pays to stay out of range. Another thing to remember with the gameplay is the addition of the infusions that you'll find laid out in the world. These are bottles that change colour, and you'll notice that they're quite distinctive but very difficult to find in certain circumstances. They're laid out across the levels, and the idea of them is to give you a sense of progression within certain boundaries: health, shields, and your vigors. These help make the game feel incremental in the sense that you start off relatively weak but still combat ready, but by the end of the game hopefully you'll have built up a hardy readiness for that. For a level that will really test your patience as well as your skill with the game. Another important thing to remember with the gameplay of this is that it's multifaceted, up and down. It's not just one fits all. You have the added bonus of the skyhook, which allows you to gain an edge over your enemies if you are feeling overwhelmed, and this game plays on that. You'll hear subtle cues behind you, above you, to the side. Your enemies won't just attack you head on in most circumstances. They will try and sneak you from behind. They don't play fair. They will gang up on you if you're not careful, and it plays to your strengths to make sure that you are mindful of not only Elizabeth and the role she plays in combat, but also the skyhook. Most people can sometimes forget about it, but it is a tremendously useful tool in outmaneuvering your enemy, as well as trying to utilise your powers in the most creative of ways.
As you progress through the game and the combat becomes more diverse by the level of enemies that you encounter, Elizabeth's contribution will become more and more significant as she locates and sends you supplies, ammunition, vigors, anything she can find to assist you during the fight, which, considering that she can't be hurt, is a tremendous asset. The handyman are particularly dangerous opponents, whereby the significant amount of damage that they absorb will be counteracted by your accuracy towards aiming for their heart. They have no qualms about chasing you around, so it's imperative that you use the skyhook in order to stay ahead of the game. The use of the vigors will also be crucial to you taking them down, especially on the hard difficulties, because the wrong vigor will have next to no effect, and the right weapon will also allow you to gain an edge over this potentially very difficult opponent, which adds a good layer of diversity to the enemies in the system, considering most of the grunts are relatively easy to take out.
I think some of the things that I really like about the combat are how simple it is. It's a criticism that's levelled against some games for being too linear or too basic. It's not challenging me to think outside the box, it's very basic. Well, having come from playing something like Borderlands 2 to jumping into this, for instance, I found that this game is tremendously forgiving, and that can sometimes play into a nicer experience of a game. Sometimes it's nice just to be able to feel like a bit of a badass waltzing through the levels, headshotting people as you go. It's not for every game to test the boundaries of realism, or indeed to test the boundaries of what's creative within its gameplay. That's where its story picks up, I would argue, some of its lacking creative elements in terms of its gameplay. And I think that the simplicity of the combat simply adds to the emphasis. You never feel like you have to rush through the combat sections or have to blast through enemies as quickly as you can. Each feel like meaningful events. You don't kill hundreds and hundreds of enemies, you only kill 5 or 6 at a time. This means that you do have the license to stop, stare, take stock of the world, immerse yourself in the subtle sound cues and some of the visual elements that otherwise you would miss if you were just always on edge looking for the next enemy potentially. Another thing I like about the combat is the diversity of the vigors. Albeit I did find myself spamming the same ones over and over again. I have this very weird fixation on the electric power. I always have since the initial Bioshock. I just think it's the coolest looking power of them all. But the murder of crows as well is tremendously useful, especially when you have a number of enemies, albeit particularly benign when you're coming up against some of the bigger enemies like the handymen or some of the more sort of the empowered bosses. I also think that some of the guns could... The fact that they tried to double up on the guns by saying that there's the Rebel versions and the Vox Populi versions and the standardised versions, they account for the same thing. I think the guns probably could have been expanded on in terms of how they feel, in terms of make something fantastical. Don't just make bullet versions. Make something cool and unique. Even here's an idea. Why not make a gun based on plasmids? Power-based weapons. That would have been really fun to see. But again, the lack of creativity in the gameplay, it can irk sometimes. But I don't think it detracts away from the experience. It keeps it in line with the previous 2 games, meaning that players can jump in and feel immediately familiar with the meat and bones of the game. And also the exploration throughout the levels, again, it's very simple. It's just about keeping your eyes open for the little doors and the little... You'll get used to searching every nook and cranny for things. I mean, the way that the items are dispersed throughout the world, and also with the addition of the code-breaking elements, i.e. paintings on the walls, you then go and need to find a code-breaking book in order to locate this hidden stash of goodies that will help you traverse the levels, especially on the harder difficulties, which you have to play on the harder difficulties. If I was going to be brutally honest, the easiest level is far, you never ever die. Not even on the last level, whereas switch it up during the main campaign, you'll still be fine, but that last level will break your spirit away. All the same, I do really praise the combat being simple in a time when it can be overcomplicated with the amounts of and the alternate left and right triggers for plasma shooting it's hard for people to get used to who are used to the more standard first person shooters. You keep pressing the left trigger hoping for something to happen in terms of strikes. But the thing that you'll realise as you play is that the gunplay is very forgiving, but the ammunition is limited for a reason. You don't need tremendous amount. The ammo is limited for a reason. You don't need to dispense with a tremendous amount of ammunition to dispense with your enemies. You just need to be accurate when it needs, you need to have a sharp eye, and you need to just be able to point it in the general direction of the enemy. you do have the downsides of you only really use it for the more precise weaponry like your sniper rifle or your carbine, which does lead me to another point. The addition of only 2 weapons is a bit of a letdown. It means that at any one time you can only have 2 weapons, which means that you do have to make a conscious decision as to what kind of game that you want to level, because you've got to think about whether or not you're going to be able to pick up ammunition for this weapon. Is this weapon going to be useful against the enemies I'm about to come up against? Do I need to keep a big weapon and a little weapon? Do I keep 2 mediocre weapons? It makes for an interesting dynamic to pick, but it means that you ultimately feel like you're missing out with other guns, especially when resources start to become scarce at the end of the game and you're trying to upgrade your weapons in order to keep up with the onslaught of more powerful enemies. You feel like you've missed out. There are, maybe that's an incentive to replay again, but I don't think as a game you should be restricted in what you experience. If effectively it all helped, and I just feel like in this game, having access to all the weapons simultaneously would have made it slightly better. But again, that's just my opinion. I know some people appreciate the 2 weapon tier system because it means that there's an interesting choice as to what guns that you have to select in order to traverse through the game. So move on to the next aspect of the game, which is its presentation and its overall feel, which is probably where this game shines like you wouldn't believe. To put this into some kind of perspective, Bioshock 2 was a game that relied on the feeling of claustrophobia, a sense of not being able to escape at any one time, this sense of around every corner potentially there was an enemy, something to scare you, something to keep you right on the edge of your pants. Bioshock 1 has a particularly jump scare worthy moment whereby you're traversing through a morgue and then this happens. And then this happens. Now, understandably, I riddled that git full of bullets. I'll never forget this. I was sitting with a buddy of mine by the name of Jamie through the house. It was during the middle of the day. We had the curtains closed. His scream emanated so loud that I screamed and shot the guy with probably 70 more bullets than he needed to. But you just didn't see that crap coming. And Bioshock was immense at crafting these moments of absolute dread, using light, colour, shadow, the sounds, the eerie tones of the voices in the background, everyone having this sense of insanity to them. Every member of Rapture was insane by some stretch of the imagination. You never felt at ease. This game, on the other hand, tries to take the tone it's the antithesis of Rapture. It's open, it's breezy, it's light, it's colourful. It has these very idealistic views and it has this idealistic sort of take on the world. Everything's prior to Art Deco, so everything's built with brick and stone and sculpted, and it's the idealistic American dream, I think, for a lot of people. It looks as the Founding Fathers, I imagine, would have envisaged America post-Victorian times, where everything is technologically advanced, but maintains that rustic effect of everything being handmade and handcrafted. It's a welcome change from Rapture. I think a lot of people would have been very, very exacerbated with a third game based under the sea. As good a design as it was, but I think that ultimately it was a decision that paid off. The dread comes from the story, the mindfuckery that's at work here, and you have to pay attention, you have to get involved with the story if it's going to have that effect on you. Granted, it isn't the sort of story that rubs everything in your face. It's the sort of story that will ply its trade well, but will leave you with subtle cues, and if you're smart, most people probably could have figured it out. I didn't, I'm dumb. I had to play through it a second time in order to go, that's very clever. But as far as its design goes, the levels of design, the idea is that you stop and marvel at a lot of it. There are subtle cues, there are subtle tones, there are very cleverly placed songs that have been rewritten expressly for this game but in old tones. Things like Girls Just Want to Have Fun by Cyndi Lauper. Tainted Love has been redone in that sense. But plus it has a overarching song called The Circle, Will the Circle Be Broken? Now, You hear Elizabeth and Booker sing this at one point, and it's a very beautiful, it's a moving song about something that I'll get onto in a little bit later in the story arc, but basically it's a very touching moment between the two characters, and only upon the second playthrough that you realise that this song has been woven into the story itself throughout, the beginning, middle and end, as a theme running throughout the story. It's incredibly clever, but something you may not have noticed, being wrapped up in so much that this world has to offer you.
Will the circle be unbroken by and by, by and by? Is a better home awaiting in the sky, in the sky?
And the interesting setting is further enhanced by the fact that it's 1912. So it has this very odd juxtaposition between the technological advancement in this world, it's a floating city, you explain to me how you do that, versus the 1912 mentality of this, it's still a very patriarchal society. Women are still treated as effectively second-class citizens. Racism is rampant in this world, and there are many occasions where you're going to be confronted with that, not even in the story, just in the world that's built around you, and you'll catch yourself, being a right-minded individual, I might add, questioning what you're seeing. You'll be offended, you'll be challenged, it'll give you that extra drive to go up against the villains, and they're all subtle. You can miss them if you just charge through. You have to stop and you have to take stock of what you're seeing. And it's all been very well crafted to leave this feeling of unease. You feel uncomfortable walking through this world because you, as the player, are exposed to a different time, and therefore all of this thing that was culturally acceptable back in those days, compared to now, where you'd hope it's not culturally acceptable, it makes you feel anxious, it makes you feel almost angry to see all of it. And that's a testament to the way that the game's been designed by the developers. They want you to feel juxtaposed to the world that they're presenting to you. Which leads me on to the third aspect of my review, the characters in this game. Now this is probably a subtle but major departure for people that hadn't noticed this about the previous two games. In Bioshock 1, you are a silent protagonist by the name of Jeff. In Bioshock 2, you're a silent protagonist, Big Daddy. Delta, I believe his name is. In the third one, you are Booker DeWitt. Now, in this instance, you are not a silent protagonist. He is a fully fleshed out character. And this is a departure because they ran the risk to the developers of making you feel like you were just along for the ride. However, I would argue that they allowed enough input from the player to make them feel invested in the character, while also maintaining their own sense of perspective on the world. The way I think this is because that the Booker character isn't fleshed out from the beginning. You almost discover his life as he discovers it. It makes you want to continue, it makes you want to progress the game. This is again juxtaposed by the character of Elizabeth.
Knock it off! Stop it! Will you stop it? Not here to hurt you.
Who are you?
My name is DeWitt. I'm a friend. I come to get you out of here.
Get away! Are you real?
I'm real enough.
And Elizabeth is a fascinating character in the sense that she, despite being locked up for her entire life, studied and experimented on, she has this wonderful sense of life, this sense of naivety about her that is a flashpoint for Booker, who up until that point had been very nihilistic, very negative, very bullish, while maintaining a slightly whimsical nature. Ultimately, has given up on life, only wants to get through and only wants to survive. As they progress through the game together, They both develop varying takes on the situations that they're in. And it isn't just as simple as black and white. I have negative, you have positive. They conflict, but they don't always disagree. They reach compromises in their philosophies, and this shows a depth of interaction that you don't see in a lot of other games. They're characters that are what they are, and they stay that way through the story. No, in this story, Booker and Elizabeth are individuals on their own paths. They're on the same journey, but they both develop as individuals. And you as the player have an investment in this. You want to see Booker succeed and bring her back and wipe away his supposed debt. You want to see Elizabeth freed to experience life and all it has to offer and all the promise that she believes it has to.
Hey, Miss Elizabeth.
Hello. Oh, this is wonderful. Well, come dance with me, Mr.
I
Twin.
don't dance. Come on, let's go.
Why? What could be better than this?
How about Paris?
Paris? I don't understand. How could we get there?
That's where that airship's going, but if you want to stay and dance, we
No,
can...
let's go. Come on, let's go. Come on, let's go right now.
Which leads me into the interaction between the two characters during gameplay. Elizabeth is not an escort mission. She looks after herself, she can't be damaged, which means that you are free to pursue combat in the way that you want to. Now this bleeds into the story very nicely and the differences of the characters. Elizabeth is not combat oriented, but she's intellectual. She'll help you with lockpicks. She'll also make interesting commentaries on the world as she observes it as she goes. This helps you as the player take her side on a lot of things, but it also helps you take Booker's side on a lot of things, being jaded individuals. She has not experienced life, and therefore has no inkling as to the savagery of the world, whereas Booker has been exposed to nothing but it. It's a very interesting dynamic, only complicated by Comstock, the main villain of the game.
I know why you have come, false shepherd. I see every sin that blackens your soul. Wounded knee, the Pinkertons, the drinking, the gambling, and of course, Anna.
Okay, I'm sure I can get this thing going.
The Lord forgives everything, but I'm just a prophet, so I don't have to. Amen.
Jesus! Hell out of here!
Fanatical, charismatic, prophetic. This Comstock is a spectre throughout the game, never really directly confronted. Similar to the Andrew Ryan of the first game, in the sense that you know he has a tie of some description because he pops up just too often for him not to have a tie of some description to our protagonist. However, as a villain, I feel that the world is sculpted in his image, and therefore the world is what you treat as the villain rather than him as an individual. And the reason why I say this is because of his fanatical nature, the inhabitants have become brainwashed into this style of thing. He is the figurehead of this, but he is not the one antagonizing you on a regular basis. It's citizens. It does make the final encounter with him satisfying in a sense, but you are left with this feeling of the figurehead is dead, but the system prevails. You have not won.
Look at you, child. You're
Hey,
a mess.
let go of her.
Elizabeth, everything I've done to keep you safe.
Safe from what?
The seed of the prophet shall sit the throne and drown in flame the mountains of man. Ask him what happened to your finger. Ask DeWitt.
Let go of me.
Ask him. Ask the...
She's your daughter, you son of a bitch! And you abandoned her! Was it worth it? Huh? Did you get what you wanted?
Booker.
Tell me!
Booker.
Tell me!
It is finished.
Nothing is finished!
Booker.
You locked her up for her whole life!
Booker.
You cut off her finger, and you put it on me!
Booker, stop it! You killed him.
It's a peculiar dynamic indeed, because in most games you take on the villain, you win, hooray, I won, yay! yay, brilliant. No, in this game, Comstock is but a footnote in the story, in a grand tapestry of things that are occurring around. And the game does well because even after he's dead, his spectre lives on and continues to challenge you. The other downside that I see to this game, however, is the lack of supposed sub-bosses or supplementary characters. The other characters that you will interact with on a regular basis are Fingerton.
Bring me the bowl! Is that not the prettiest young white girl in all of Columbia? First throw! It was me! It was all me! Please! Please! Come on! Are you gonna throw it? Or are you taking your coffee black these days?
Who acts as the antagonist through a fairly substantial chunk of the level. And the Lutesid.
Heads.
Or tails.
Come on, let me through. Heads.
Or tails.
Tails. Told you. I never find that as satisfying as I'd imagined.
Chin up. There's always next time.
I suppose there is.
No.
Dead is dead, Elizabeth.
Dead is dead.
What the hell did...
I see heads.
And I see tails.
It's all a matter of perspective.
Why are you following us? Who sent you? Comstock? What do you want?
What do you see here, from this angle?
Dead.
Listen.
And that angle?
Alive.
Walker. Shenlin.
The body's gone.
It was never here.
It's another Columbia.
A different Columbia.
The same coin.
A different perspective.
Heads.
Tails.
Dead.
Alive.
We have to go through to this other Columbia.
It's like riding a bicycle.
One never really forgets.
One just needs the courage to climb aboard.
Is now, that's not a tremendous amount. Daisy Fitzroy does feature, but I wouldn't say that she is, she's more of an objective than anything.
Comstock is the god of the white man, the rich man, the pitiless man. But if you believe in common folk, then join the Vox. If you believe in the righteous folk, then join the Vox.
My ship.
And the Vox shall give her to you.
She doesn't antagonize you, she becomes an ally and then an enemy. Actually setting up a very interesting character moment for Elizabeth when she's forced to confront mortality for the first time in its starkest form.
No! No!
Kill the imposters. Burn their bodies when you're done.
No, no, no! She's going to kill that child. Booker, we have to do something. We have to act. We have to get in there. Come on, Booker, we've got to get out of here. Boost me up. Go to the window and distract Daisy. Go!
Is this it? Is this your movement, Daisy?
This is what needs to be done. You see, the founders ain't nothing but weeds. Cut them down and they just grow back. If you want to get rid of the weed, you gotta pull it up from the root. It's the only way to get...
Elizabeth.
I guess it runs in the family.
This moment comes to shape Elizabeth going forward in the story, and it's an important character moment for her as she decides that even though this child belongs to her, is a member of a society that clearly has systemic flaws throughout, she cannot see the justification of one life over another until she's confronted with it and makes a very stark and very drastic choice. It's a moment that you empathise with her, and it's not one that's resolved straight away. In fact, it doesn't get resolved at all, but before you even have time to really absorb the situation and what she's done, bang, you're straight back into the story and back into the furore of what the game has to offer.
Listen.
How do you do it?
How do I do what?
Forget. How do you wash away the things that you've done?
You don't. You just learn to live with it.
And again, the Lutesses, mysterious folk. You'll confront them towards the beginning of the game and they'll just pop up out of nowhere and you'll think, you won't think anything of it, just peculiar. But as you progress through the game, their influence becomes even more confusing and only adds to the confusion that the game brings to most of its gameplays when they're trying to figure out what the holy hell is going on in this game at the best of times, when it's being explained to them as they're on this journey and they're on the set pieces and it's being, information is being fed. It doesn't even take into account the voice recordings and a lot of the memorabilia that's scattered around the world that will give you clues and intros into what exactly is happening. As a matter of fact, in the first meeting of Elizabeth, there is a bomb dropped in terms of a voice recording, but of course you don't know this playing through the first time, hence why you need to play it through a second time in order to appreciate just how big a story moment it is, even though at the time you pick it up, listen to it and go, eh? The Lutesses though are again a footnote, and I think the game suffers as a result of its lack of cast. There's just not that diverse a cast here. It hurts the game in certain aspects, but then again it allows you more time to focus on the main characters. But then again it would have been nice to have the occasional protagonist that wasn't a giant bird that turned up and done fuck up everything every time you're about to get home. Fucking songbird. Really annoying. Really annoying. You'll see. Which leads me on to my final point about the game, the story. Now, as I preface this at the beginning of the review, if you didn't get Inception, I will do my best to try and explain this game's story as best I can. So, of course, this is a big spoiler warning all over the screen, spoiler. So effectively, you've been playing the game as Booker DeWitt, trying to unravel the mystery of who this girl is and what her connection is to you. When you meet her, she's revealed to be called Elizabeth, who's been trapped in a tower all her life. Now, at the end of the game, you defeat Songbird, you defeat the onslaught of enemies attacking the ship, and destroy a siphon that's inhibiting Elizabeth's power to be able to open tears into other worlds.
The Whistler! Elizabeth! The bird, Elizabeth! I lost control! He's coming!
No, he isn't.
And the curtain is lifted. Elizabeth is able to see what exactly is going on. And she takes you on this journey through the last 15 minutes of the game, which is a surprising turn. 15 minutes of non-interactivity is, you know, that's usually reserved at the beginning of a game, not the end. But it serves to enlighten the players to exactly what's happened up until this point. And effectively what has happened is Booker is Comstock. Comstock is Booker.
Booker DeWitt, are you ready to be born again?
Why are we back here?
This isn't the same place, Booker.
Of course it is. I remember.
Are you ready to leave behind all that has gone before? Wipe the slate clean.
Who are you?
You chose to walk away, but in other oceans, you didn't. You took the baptism, and you were born again as a different man. It all has to end, to have never started, not just in this world, but in all of ours.
Smother him in the crab.
Smother. Before the choice is made, before you are reborn.
And what name shall you take, my son?
He's Zachary Comstock. He's Booker DeWitt.
No. I'm both.
And it delves into the many worlds theory, whereby there are infinite amount of possibilities and an infinite amount of other worlds.
See? That's stars. They're doors.
Doors to
everywhere. All that's left is the choosing.
And in one of these worlds, instead of accepting a baptism after the Battle of Wounded Knee, he rejects it and becomes the character we know and we've been playing as. In another world, he accepted the baptism and became Zachary Comstock. Now in this world, he ended up becoming a very prolific politician who initiated the research into the potential of a floating city, recruited Lutece, the female version, not the male version, and began instigating the events of the game in this universe. And this is where it can sometimes get confusing for people. They exist in parallel universes. Comstock and Lutece are the ones who initiate the paradox of being able to travel between universes via tears, they call them. The female Lutece meets her male counterpart in a universe, brings him across, and they begin to experiment while creating this world, Columbia. However, Comstock realizes that having jumped through many tears himself in an attempt to become a prophet by seeing events unfold before they happen in other universes and then by making a prediction, has become stale. He's also aged rapidly, hence why there is a visual difference between the two, even though the two time frames coexist at the same time. This leads to the revelation of the game. So, as Elizabeth takes you through Rapture, which is a brilliant little throwback to the first game, whereby you're in the same area that Jack first encountered as he entered Rapture for the first time, maybe even at the same sort of time, you just don't know. As a matter of fact, it's been thrown in there. You can hear Songbird's scream, or his song, in the first game. So unless they always had this in the back of their heads that Songbird was going to be a villain at some point in the second or third games.
What is this place? Elizabeth?
It's a doorway. One of many. This way.
What do you mean it's a doorway? Where are you going?
Oh, come on. Yes, it's this way.
What Comstock said about your finger. Is there an answer here? Do you...
Down here. This is where we have to go.
Why? What is going on? Elizabeth, what do you mean this is a doorway?
I'll have to show you.
Probably gonna regret this. City at the bottom of the ocean. Ridiculous.
Wow, what a piece of writing that is. But anyway, I digress. Songbird is defeated by being crushed under the weight of the water.
Where is he? Where is he?
It's okay. It's all right. I'm here. Just go. There you go.
Elizabeth, I'm sorry.
Traverse through Rapture, and Elizabeth explains to you exactly what's happened. And as the realization sets in that you are Comstock, it becomes a point of, okay, I need to sacrifice myself in order to stop any of this from happening. Now, at the end of the game, I have to admit, I was blown away by this revelation, and it took me, it stuck with me. It was one of those game endings that you keep thinking about. It just sticks with you. You think, am I getting it? Am I missing something? And again, I'm a glass half full kind of guy, so at the end, assuming that you've you've completed it on a high enough difficulty, you will get a very, very short cutscene at the end of the game whereby Booker wakes at his desk, hears the tinging of a child's toy, goes to Anna's room, Anna DeWitt, his daughter, and to see if she's there, and it cuts just as you are about to peer into the crypt. Now I'd like to think that Booker made it home, and Anna was okay, and now he gets a second chance.
Anna?
Is that you?
It's revealed though that it's not the end due to the Buried at Sea DLC, whereby Elizabeth, or in this case Anna, actually goes to Rapture, finding out that there was a version of Comstock that had abandoned his plight halfway through. So instead of becoming Booker DeWitt or Comstock, he actually became Comstock and then gave up halfway through. Now this DLC is something that I've not yet played, so I can't comment on it a tremendous amount, but I can leave you with this. It's a very, very cleverly worded, very cleverly written story that will touch on a number of elements of emotion, and I can't praise it enough for that. It's one of the best stories that I've ever played. The only thing I would say is that it is quite overwhelming, it is quite convoluted. Take the time to look around you, absorb the world that the developers have laid at your feet, and you will have a brilliantly fun and well-crafted experience to make your way through. So I'd say the game's strong points are its story, its relatively fun gameplay, and its characters, as well as its sound design and its platforming design. They're both beautiful. Beautiful. It's a stunning world and it's a stunning soundtrack. You just don't appreciate it until you play it through yourself, and you're just left with it's fantastic. The downside is the relatively short time that it takes to play the game, the relatively simplistic combat, which I will agree is simplistic. I would prefer something slightly more complicated, but that's just my personal preference. I don't take anything away from the simplicity, but ultimately as well, the lack of roster, the lack of depth in terms of its other characters as well, I feel harms it overall. Overall, I'd say this game's a masterpiece. So, that's been Bioshock Infinite. I hope you enjoyed this review. Next week, I'll be checking out something a little bit different, because most of my reviews so far have been overwhelmingly positive. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of something that sucks ass and see if I've got actually the chops to actually review something with real bites and meaning. In the meantime, thanks very much again for watching. Stick around for the prologue. Anywho, take care, and I'll see you on the next episode of Halcyon.